Hello, welcome back everyone to the IELTS online series, and today is the day 4 of this series and we'll be starting with the writing section. In today's class, we'll be talking about the structure of the IELTS writing exam along with what are the question types that you have in the first academic task of the writing section. And we will also discuss the first question type of academic task 1. So let us begin quickly. So when we talk about the IELTS exam structure, you have 2 questions and you are required to finish both of those questions or essays in a time period of 60 minutes. So for the first, we'll call the first question academic task 1 and we will call the second question academic task 2 or essay 1 and essay 2 for this video or for this series. And when we talk about academic task 1, it requires you to write 150 words and you're also required to look at some kind of a statistical diagram or a figure-based diagram, and you're required to describe that in your own words in a word limit of 150 words. When we talk about assessing your essay, the essay is basically judged on your ability to organize, present, and possibly compare data. If it's an statistical diagram, describe the stages of a process if the diagram is based on a figure, and describe an object or event and or explain how something works. So this falls under a certain question type. As we move on with the class, things will be clearer. And it is recommended that you spend only 20 minutes on academic task 1 and 40 minutes on academic task 2. The reason is because, as I have already not talked about academic task 2, so academic task 2 ले चाहिँ तपाईलाई 250 words लेख भन्छ, right? While academic task 1 ले चाहिँ 150 words matra lekhna bhanja. Now in this case, as we can see, there is a difference in word count, which actually is very straightforward कि तपाईले academic task 1 मा अलिकति कम words लेख्नु पर्छ र academic task 2 मा 250 words लेख्नु पर्छ. However, some students may ask that just because of difference in words of 100 words, why should I actually, divide the timing as so 20 and 40, because it does seem like an unbalanced allocation of time for each essay, right? Now, the reason that I recommended to spend 20 minutes is because let's say you get, if we see the percentage of weightage percentage of both these questions, you can see that 150 is around 32.5 percentage, whereas 250 is around 67.5 percentage, right? Now, as we can see, if you convert these word counts into percentage, this is only around 30 percentage of your entire word count, while this is around 68 percentage, right? Now, because of this, whenever you get a score, let's say you got a score of 7 in task 1 and a score of 5 in task 2, in that case, what they're going to do is they're going to take 32.5 percentage of your task 1 score. So they're taking lesser percentage of your higher score and they're taking bigger percentage of your smaller score, right? So that brings your entire score down. And hence it is recommended, so that's why you need to focus more on task 2, because the weightage of task 2 is more in your entire writing score. I hope that I'm clear, and this is the reason why we recommend to spend 20 minutes on academic task 1. All right, so let us move on and let us look at the question types that we have in academic task 1. So these are the 6 question types that we will be discussing. The first one is bar graph, and then we have pie chart, a table chart, a line graph. So all of these 4 questions fall into the statistical figures, while these 2 falls under a diagram based question, right? Now, this is how I have categorized. However, another broad category can be that you can either see a single figure or you can see a multiple figure question as well, right? But no matter it be a single figure or a multiple figure, the questions are actually going to be just from these question types. So if you are aware about these question types, you should be easily able to handle any kind of question in the academic task 1. All right. Now, before we jump into discussing the question types or how to approach the academic task 1, I want you to know the two different kinds of essay structures that you can write in the exam. The first one is starting with an introduction, then an overview, then writing 2 body paragraphs. The second structure of the essay is writing an introduction, jumping directly to your body paragraphs, and then writing an conclusion, right? Now, for this class, we will be going with this essay structure instead of the other one. The reason being the fact that if you look at the scoring rubrics presented by both IDP and British Council, you can see that they emphasize a lot on the overview part, right? If तपाईले 6 अथवा 5.5 पनि ल्याउनुहुन्छ भने चाहिँ 5.5 को स्कोरिङ रुब्रिकमा चाहिँ तपाईको clear overview mention गरेको छ भने चाहिँ you can increase your score up to 6. Obviously there are other criteria as well, but this is one of the very important criteria for you to be able to score at least a 6 in your writing section, right? We'll have a different video to discuss the scoring rubrics and what are the scoring criteria for the writing task. But for now, the reason why we are choosing this essay structure is because of the importance of overview in an essay. Now, this again does not become an incorrect or an ineffective way of writing an essay. You can obviously do that, but in that case you should be able to, instead of summarizing your essay in this second paragraph, you are actually summarizing it in the last paragraph. But as I have already mentioned, because it has been explicitly mentioned in both the British Council and IDP IELTS rubrics, we are going to go with this essay structure. All right. Now, before we actually jump into discussing the question types, एउटा कुरा के बुझ्नुपर्ने हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ question पाउने बित्तिकै I do not suggest you to start writing your essay. Please make sure that as you are getting your question, you are trying to understand the question, and I want you to at least be able to make notes before you start the question. So now let us look at how should we approach academic task 1 question type. So I will start with first of all discussing the first question type, and then I will at the end of the video I will summarize on what are the steps that we can follow. So let us begin. Now this is a sample of a bar chart question. As we can see, the figure is pretty much clear. It's a statistical diagram. You can read the question, and now let us look at the first step that we need to take while we approach this question. Now the first thing that we are going to do is identify the question type. It's pretty much clear that the question is a bar graph question. Then understand the question, topic question, right? Now in this case, the topic question is, the chart below shows the expenditure of 2 countries on consumer goods in 2010. Now it is very easy for us to understand किनभने दुईटा countries को चाहिँ expenditure देखाएको छ र consumer goods को expenditure देखाएको छ for the year 2010. र त्यो दुईटा country भनेको चाहिँ France र UK हो, र त्यो दुईटा consumer goods भनेको cars, computers, books, perfume or camera. So it's not very difficult for us to understand the topic of the question as well. Now identify the key elements. Now while we understand the topic of the question, we also looked at the key elements, which is दुईटा country र 5 वटा consumer goods को बारेमा चाहिँ कुरा गरेको रहेछ हैन. Apart from that, also look at whether there is a point of time or a period of time, right? अब point of time भनेको एउटा specific point of time को data दिनु. अब यही केसमा 2010 को सट्टा 2010 को every month को data दिएको भए Jan, Feb, March, April, May, June देखि December सम्मको data दिएको भए चाहिँ it would have been a period of time. But in this case, since 2010 लाई accumulate गरेर र 2010 मा के data थियो, so यो भनेको point of time को data भयो हैन. Period of time भनेको तपाईको 2010 देखि 2020 को डेटा अथवा 2010 मै जनवरी देखि डिसेम्बर को डेटा हैन. सो त्यो केसेसमा चाहिँ पिरियड अफ टाइम हुन्छ. सो इट इज भेरी इम्पोर्टेन्ट फर यु टु आइडेन्टिफाई वेदर द फिगर इज बेस्ड अन अ पिरियड अफ टाइम or a point of time. In this case, the figure is based on a point of time, which is 2010. Again, since we identified that the figure was based on a point of time, what we are going to do is we are going to try to look at the highest and least data points in the question. Now 2010 को डेटा दिएको छ. 2010 मा UK ले अथवा फ्रान्स ले चाहिँ 5 वटा कन्ज्युमर गुडमा कति पाउन्ड्स खर्च गरेको रहेछ भन्ने कुरा दिएको छ, राइट? So now let us look at the highest and least points. So युकेले चाहिँ सबैभन्दा बेसी खर्च गरेको भनेको कार्समा हो, राइट, र सबैभन्दा लिस्ट खर्च गरेको भनेको पर्फ्युममा हो. फ्रान्सले सबैभन्दा बेसी खर्च गरेको भनेको पनि कार्समै हो र सबैभन्दा कम खर्च गरेको भनेको क्यामरासमा हो, राइट. So now whenever there is a point of time based figure, we are going to look at the highest and least data points. Now this is a kind of a formula that you can apply. Obviously there are so many other ways that you can look at this figure, but this is actually a straightforward way to look at the major highlights of the figure, because whenever you are looking at a statistical diagram, you want to see, okay, सबैभन्दा बेसी खर्च कसले गरेर रहेछ अथवा केमा गरेर रहेछ, सबैभन्दा कम खर्च केमा गरेर रहेछ, right. अर्को कुरा, there are other insights also that you can generate from this figure, which is ओभरअल युकेले बेसी खर्च गरेर रहेछ और फ्रान्सले बेसी खर्च गरेर रहेछ हैन. इफ यु रिमेम्बर हामीले फर्स्ट स्लाइडतिर नै कुरा गरेको थियौँ कि यु आर असेस्ड on your ability to be able to compare data as well, right. So अब यो केसमा फ्रान्स र युके किनभने दुईटा कन्ट्रीको कुरा गरेको छ, also 5 वटा कन्ज्युमर गुड्सको कुरा गरेको छ, we should try our best to be able to compare between these key components that has been given in the figure. Now in this case what we are trying to do is if we look at roughly नै हेर्यो भने चाहिँ युके को almost सबैमा चाहिँ बेसी छ. Now if you add all of these just roughly, you'll see that expenditure of UK is greater than expenditure of France, right. Another very important trend that you can see in this figure is दुवै कन्ट्रिजमा चाहिँ दुवै कन्ट्रिजको एक्सपेन्डिचरमा खासै फरक छैन in these 4 consumer goods, whereas in cameras there is a significant difference between the expenditure of both the countries, right. So most significant difference in expenditure of both countries is on camera. Now these are, apart from just looking at the highest and least data points, I also generated other insights from this given figure based on anything that was noticeable or anything that was kind of out of trend or was following a trend, right. So यसको बेसिसमा चाहिँ मैले नोट्सहरू चाहिँ बनाउनु पर्यो, और एटलिस्ट इफ तपाईँले कम्प्युटर बेस लिँदै हुनुहुन्छ र तपाईँले हुन त कम्प्युटर बेसमा यु डु गेट पेपर टु मेक नोट्स, सो इन द्याट केस यु सुड बी एबल टु मेक नोट्स है. अर्को भनेको आफ्टर यु आर डन डुइङ दिस इन केस अफ अ पोइन्ट अफ टाइम बेस्ड फिगर, देन ट्राई टु ग्रुप इन्फर्मेसन, राइट. सो लेट मी जस्ट क्लियर दिस अ लिटल. Alright, so in now what we are trying to do is there any kind of similar trend on the basis of which we can group data here, right? Now let us see. Cars ko case ma UK is spending more than France, right? So UK che orange ho ra France se blue ho, so UK is spending. In computer, France is spending more than UK. In books, again UK is spending more than France. In perfume, France is spending more than UK. In cameras, UK is spending more than France. Now, can we group information, right? So we can group these 3 together and we can group these 2 together, right? So whenever you see at a statistical figure, try to see that is there any kind of trend that I can group together. In this case, we are going to group cars, books and cameras, and then we are going to group computers and perfume. So in cars, books and cameras, people of UK spend more money than that of France, and in perfume and computers, French spend more money than British, right? Now these are all the things that I'm actually doing before I have started to write my essay, right? So whenever you are looking at a figure, so this is how you should approach academic task 1, a statistical based question, and this is the kind of approach that we are going to use in other statistical kind of questions as well, no matter it be a pie chart, a table graph or a line graph, right? Now let us move on. Now after we are done making notes, I'll just summarize the steps that you should take before you start writing our essay, which is identifying the type of diagram. Now you don't have to write all of these in your note paper, because obviously if you're taking a paper-based test, you're not going to get extra sheet to make notes. So in that case, try to just use acronyms and be very precise whenever you can. And you can just identify the type of diagram in your brain, also identify the key components, and then when you make notes, try to write down the major highlights or major trends or group information, and you can just write those parts in your answer sheet. So the next step would be understanding the topic of the question and study the diagram very carefully. Identify the number of elements. So the number of elements are what are the major key components along with the time period and the unit of measurement, whether it is in pounds, US dollars, AUDs, grams, depending on the context of the question, right? Further, identify if the point has a period of time or a point of time. If the figure has a point of time, you are going to look at the highest and least data points to identify the major highlights of the question. If the figure has a period of time, you are going to look at the increasing or decreasing trends. All right. Then make notes for any trends, changes, developments, or noticeable features, and group information based on similar trends. So this is what we have done so far for this question. Now let us look at how to write the introduction for academic task 1 question. So introduction लेख्ने बेला जहिले पनि के बुझ्नु पर्यो भन्दाखेरि introduction is basically an information that you're giving to the reader to understand, to let them know what are you going to write in the next 150 words or in the next 120 words, right? So the first sentence or introduction is to generally explain the reader what you are going to talk about, right? And what are the information that you should give to the reader for them to be able to easily understand your essay. Now there is a sample structure for you to write the introduction for academic task 1, and your introduction is basically the question paraphrased along with brief about what you see in the diagram. For example, what the visual diagram is, the data source, and when the data was collected. I also have a sample introduction structure. The given, depicted, illustrated, demonstrated. So these are the verbs that you can use, right? Plus name of the figure. It could be a bar chart, a line graph, and so and so. Plus shows, again another verb. Again, you can use multiple varieties of verb here. Title of the figure, which should be paraphrased. Then mention all the key elements and then the time period. Right now, this is a sample of introduction, and at least you should be able to mention all of these information in your introduction. I hope I'm clear. Now, as we made the notes, we are going to use these 4 information in our introduction as per the sample that we just saw. All right. Now, let us look at the introduction for the bar graph. The given, so this is a verb. The given bar chart, name of the diagram, illustrates another verb. Do not repeat the same verb again. The given bar chart illustrates the amount of money spent on 5 consumer goods, which are this in France and UK in 2000. The units are measured in pound sterling. So we paraphrase the question. As you can see, the question was not the same. The question said the expenditure of 2 countries on consumer goods, while I am saying the amount of money spent, right, on 5. So I mentioned the 5 consumer goods, I mentioned the 2 countries, I mentioned the time period, and I also mentioned the unit of measurement. So my introduction is complete here. So please make sure that at least you are mentioning all of these important parts of the introduction in the introduction. Now there are a few do's and don'ts that you should know before you try to write an introduction. The do's, first of all, I'll go with the do's. Write a clear introduction to describe what you see, meaning you can follow the sample that we have just discussed and try to be very clear. Do not try to complicate things. Just mention the key elements, paraphrase the question a little, mention the time period, and you are good to go. Paraphrase the question prompt, meaning do not use the exact keywords, do not use the exact language or rephrase that has been used in the question. You don't have to completely change the major keywords of the question, but try to active लाई passive बनाउँदा भयो अथवा noun form लाई verb form मा convert गर्दा भयो हैन. There are a few ways of paraphrasing the question, so you should be able to do that. For example, यहाँ चाहिँ unemployed लाई चाहिँ people who are unemployed, right? So I'm not changing the major keyword, but I'm just using another language. 1970 to 2000 दिएको छ भने over 3 decades from 1970. So these are a few ways of rephrasing or paraphrasing the question. अर्को important thing is if you are copying more than 2 consecutive two consecutive words. These from the question, these words will not be counted in your word count, right? अब question तपाईले डिटो कपी गर्नु भएको छ भने चाहिँ त्यो तपाईको 150 वर्ड काउन्टमा काउन्ट भइदिदैन र तपाईको इफ वर्ड काउन्ट पुगेन भने त अब मार्किङ अभियसली हुने कुरै भएन हैन तपाईको टास्क अचिभ नभइसकेपछि यु विल एनीवेज गेट अ 5 or 5.5. So do not copy more than 2 consecutive words from your question. All right, use keywords in your introduction, example dates, times, countries, and genders. So we have already talked about this. Now, do not present irrelevant information, example the x-axis, the y-axis, the gray line, so and so. This is completely irrelevant and not necessary. Copy the question prompt word for word. Do not copy exact words from your question, especially not more than 2 consecutive words. If you need to copy, you can at least copy 2 consecutive words, but not more than that, especially in cases of using major keywords. Do not change the keywords in the question to inaccurate synonyms, right? Now, unemployed females, you cannot say unemployed girls, right? Because girls and females are completely two different categories. Now, be aware of these kinds of things. If you don't know exact synonyms of the words, just rephrase the question, but do not try to use inaccurate synonyms. Now, these are few do's and don'ts of writing an introduction. Now let us look how to write the overview for academic task 1. Now this is one of the very important paragraphs and one of the very important parts in your essay as well, because I have already mentioned that this may determine whether you will get a score of 5.5 or 6. Especially, obviously there are other criteria as well, but this is one of the very important criteria. About overview लेख्नको लागि I'm sure that you guys must be asking that we made a lot of notes. अब त्यो notes चाहिँ कहाँ use गर्ने हैन? So हामीले सुरुमा बनाएको नोट्सहरु चाहिँ अब हामीले यहाँ overview लेख्ने बेला चाहिँ use गर्नु पर्यो हैन? So in the plan step, since you identify whether the figure was a point of time or a period, use that information to write your overview. Now, how should you use that information? If the figure is based on a point of time, you should mention the highest or lowest data points from the figure. अब अघिको क्वेशनको केसमा के थियो त? The highest expenditure of UK was on cars. In fact, दुबईको फ्रान्स र युके दुबईको कार्समा थियो, राइट? अनि लिस्ट एक्सपेन्डिचर चाहिँ तपाईको युके को चाहिँ आई बिलिभ युके को इट वाज अन लिस्ट वाज अन perfume, and for France it was on camera, right? Least was on perfume, and for France it is on cameras. So now, since we already know about this information, we are going to mention this information on our overview. Now, if the figure was based on a period of time, we are going to talk about the increasing or decreasing trends from the figure. Now, don't worry, we will discuss a figure based on a period of time as well, and then we will see how to make notes for that question. The overview is in your response should summarize what you see in the visual diagram. It should summarize the main trends, changes, developments, stages, and noticeable features. Now, apart from noting down the highest and least data points, we also noted down other significant features where we said that expenditure of UK is greater than expenditure of France, right? We also said that the most significant difference between expenditure is on cameras, right? Now, these are other major noticeable features that we had noted, and we are going to mention all of this in our overview, right? Also, one of the very important criteria for overview is please do not use numbers in your overview, right? So do not mention the data points. Now, if you're saying that the expenditure of UK is highest on cars, do not mention the amount of money that they are spending on cars. Do not say that the amount of UK is highest on cars at $400,000, while for France the expenditure on cars is around $350,000. So do not mention that information in your overview. It should just be a summary. Basically, overview is like an opening statement of your essay. For example, the article अथवा न्युजपेपर पनि पढ्दाखेरि अथवा कुनै रिसर्च आर्टिकल पढ्दाखेरि यु गाइज विल सी द्याट तपाईँको फर्स्ट प्याराग्राफमै कन्क्लुजन के हुन्छ त्यो सुरुमै भनिदिएको हुन्छ होइन. अब रिसर्चको तपाईँले कुनै पेपर पढ्नुहुन्छ भने एब्स्ट्र्याक्टमा यो रिसर्चको कन्क्लुजन के हो त्यो सुरुमै भनिदिएको हुन्छ होइन. सो सिमिलरली इन दिस केस एज वेल वी आर गोइङ टु से द मेजर हाइलाइट्स, द मेन हाइलाइट्स अफ आवर एन्टायर एसे initially, and in our body paragraph we will justify our main highlights by providing data points, right? So do not mention about numbers or data. Now when I say numbers, I don't mean कि तपाईँले year or कुनै खालको number नै लेख्न पाउनु हुँदैन भनेको चाहिँ होइन. Just do not mention exact data points because we are going to write about that in our body paragraph. So here is a sample of an overview. Overall, it can be clearly seen that the numbers of people employed have increased over the period, whereas the unemployed figures have remained stable, right? Now, this is a sample of a different kind of question. However, you can see that I have not used any number and I'm just giving a general summary of what's probably happening in the figure. Now, again, coming to the notes that we had made, we just talked about this, and these are the notes that we are going to use in our overview. So now let us see the overview for the bar graph question. So overall, the UK spent more money on consumer goods than France in the period given. So this was our major highlight. Both the British and the French spent most of their money on cars, whereas the least amount of money was spent on perfume in the UK compared to cameras in France. So now we are mentioning the highest and lowest data points. Furthermore, the most significant difference in expenditure between two countries was on cameras. So now we have mentioned all the noticeable features and all the highlights that we had noted in our overview by using few connectors here and there. Or there is another example of overview for the same question as well. So I have started with the same statement, which is overall the UK spent more money on consumer goods than France in the period given, right? But instead of writing about the highest and least data points, what I'm doing is I'm using this information, which is जुन grouping गरेको information थियो त्यो मैले mention गरेको छु, right? So both of these ways are good enough to be written in an overview, but if you are not finding any kind of groupings on the basis of similar trends, you can choose to write the highest and least data points, which would also be fine. But if there is a better way of presenting your information by grouping data on the basis of similar trends, even if the figure is based on a point of time, you can go and mention that information in your overview as well. Now remember that you have a word count of 150, so you cannot write both of this information in the overview. I mean, if you can be very precise, then you may choose to write both of these information in your overview in one essay. But since we just have a word limit of 150 words, and this is a time test, so don't waste your time, and you can just choose to write between one of these ways, and you should be fine. Now in this case, in cars, books and cameras, British spent relatively more than French, whereas in the remaining goods, France has more expenditure than the UK. Now this is also something that we had noted earlier in our figure, right, on the basis of by grouping on the basis of similar trends, that the key components of the question were following. Moreover, and the last line is also similar, so this was a noticeable feature, and hence I have mentioned it in this overview as well. Now these are two ways that you can go about writing the overview for this question. Alright, now again there are a few do's and don'ts of overview as well. Start your overview by using linking words such as overall, to summarize, and summary, and there are tons of others more, and you can choose to do that. Look for trends in the diagram. Is there an overall decrease, increase, or fluctuation in the visual diagram? Are there any high or low points? Is it stable? Now this is the most straightforward way to go about writing your overview, because the only two kinds of questions that you're going to see is whether there is going to be a period of time or a point of time. There may be questions where you may be able to write about from both perspectives, which is a period of time and point of time. So we'll talk about those kind of questions as well as we move on with the class. Now, another important thing is if the visual diagram shows the future predictions, summarize the future trends in your overview. र कुनै कुनै क्वेसनहरुमा चाहिँ तपाईको फ्युचरको डेटाहरु पनि दिएको हुन्छ, त्यस्तो क्वेसन छ भने चाहिँ you have to ensure that you are mentioning that information in your overview. don'ts को कुरा गर्ने हो भने चाहिँ do not include data or figures in your overview, only include a summary of the main trends or features. So this is something that we have just discussed. Do not identify everything over in the overview. It should just be a summary statement of the most noticeable features in the diagram. सबै कुराहरु भनिराख्नु पर्दैन, because यो केसमा पनि you saw that there were 5 consumer goods, but we just talked about, you know, cars and perfume and cameras, and we are not talking about books and computers, right? Because they are there, but we just chose to mention the highest or least points, right? So that you can go about that. Highlight key features with data figures. So do not highlight key features with data figures. Highlight any change in overall trend of the visual diagram. So do not mention data. All right. Now, I hope that you guys are clear on what an introduction and overview for the academic task 1 question is. Now let us quickly look at writing body paragraph for the academic task 1 question, especially for this question. So when I talk about body paragraph, you should think about body paragraph, the body of your essay. Literally, the introduction and overview are basically the brains of your essay, where you have done almost all the work. You know what are your major highlights, and by this time you should know that what are you going to write in your body paragraph 1, and you should know what are you going to write in your body paragraph 2. So the division चाहिँ तपाईले लेख्नुभन्दा अगाडि नै गरिसक्नु पर्ने हुन्छ हैन, किनभने राइटिङको एउटा इम्पोर्टेन्ट क्राइटेरिया के हो भन्दाखेरि कोहेरेन्स एन्ड कोहेसिभनेस पनि हो, where they are also judging your essay on the basis of तपाईले कतिको इन्फर्मेसन ग्रुपिङ गरेर प्रिसाइज तरिकामा लेख्नु भएको छ, कि तपाईले एकदम धेरै इन्फर्मेसन रिपिट गरेर एकदमै हाफाजार्डली आफ्नो एसे लेख्नु भएको छ हैन. So we'll also talk about the criteria, as I've already mentioned. त्यसमा हामीले coherence and cohesiveness को बारेमा पनि कुरा गर्छौं in the latter part of the video of the series. Not this video, we'll talk about it in a later video. Anyways, so as I've already mentioned, overview मा चाहिँ तपाईले एउटा summary mention गर्नुहुन्छ आफ्नो एसेको. So body paragraph should be the further elaboration about the main ideas that you have mentioned in your overview. So if you're saying that, hey, cars, फ्रान्स र युकेको मान्छेहरूले चाहिँ कार्समा सबैभन्दा बेसी खर्च गर्ने रहेछ र सबैभन्दा कम खर्च चाहिँ युकेको मान्छेहरूले पर्फ्युममा गर्ने रहेछ र फ्रान्सको मान्छेहरूले क्यामेरासमा गर्ने रहेछ भनेपछि नाउ इट्स योर टर्न टु गिभ data and justify, give proof to justify the statements that you have mentioned in your overview. So that is how you should look at the body paragraphs, right? अर्को इम्पोर्टेन्ट कुरा, हामीले नोट बनाउने बेला जसरी हामीले ग्रुपिङ गरेको थियौँ त्यही ग्रुपिङ अनुसार चाहिँ यु शुड डिसाइड कि म फर्स्ट प्याराग्राफमा कुन ग्रुपको बारेमा कुरा गर्छु र सेकेन्डमा कुन ग्रुपको बारेमा कुरा गर्छु. Now in this case, we had decided that first 3 goods को लागि चाहिँ expenditure of UK was greater than expenditure of France, and for the remaining goods it was the other way around, right? So now in body paragraph 1 we are going to talk about car, computers, and so let us go back to the question once again. So cars, in cars, books and camera, people of UK had spent more money, right? So in cars, books and cameras. So we are going to talk about this in body paragraph 1. In body paragraph 2, we are going to talk about the remaining, which is computers and perfume, right? अब यो केसमा चाहिँ युके र फ्रान्स दुवैको एक्सपेन्डिचरको बारेमा हामी कुरा गर्छौं by comparing the kind of expenditure that they are making in these consumer goods, right? So body paragraph मा if तपाईले यसरी डिवाइड गर्नुहुन्छ भने चाहिँ your essay is going to be a coherent essay, right? Now there are obviously other ways of writing your body paragraph and making it coherent as well, but this is one very straightforward way, right? So note बनाउने बेला it completely, your essay is going to depend on what kind of ideas that you have generated from the essay during the note phase. All right. You should also ensure that you complete the task by showing the complete picture of the diagram to the reader of your essay, right? Now, one of the very important criteria of writing task 1 is task achievement, right? अब तपाईको 150 words पुग्यो, यो body paragraph 1 कै कुरा गर्दा गर्दै 150 words पुग्यो, so decide कि okay म computer perfume को बारेमा कुरै गर्दिन नि हैन. So त्यो चाहिँ तपाईले भन्न पाउनु हुँदैन हैन. You have to ensure that you are mentioning all the key components of the diagram in your essay. र अर्को इम्पोर्टेन्ट थिङ टु कन्सिडर इज द्याट whenever you're writing the essay, write it from the perspective that the reader is not going to have the access to the question. Now, what are the information I need to give so that they are able to understand and get all the information that they need to without looking at the statistical figure or the diagram based figure. Now, this is one of the very important thing that you should be careful about whenever you're writing the essay. So make sure that key information or routine so that they are basically able to imagine the visual of the diagram by reading your essay, right? अब लेख्दाखेरि divide the body paragraph on the basis of groupings that you noted earlier. So we already talked about that. So in body paragraph 1 we are going to talk about cars, books and cameras, and in the second body paragraph we are going to talk about computer and perfumes. Write a topic statement about each paragraph. So whenever you are starting your body paragraph, write a summary of whatever you're going to write in the essay. So we'll look at example of that as we see the body paragraphs for this question. Elaborate on your ideas displaying coherency and cohesiveness and grammatical range and accuracy, right? Now you have to make sure that you are showing grammatical range, meaning tapaile tense ko awareness athwa tapaile you should also be able to use connectors such as furthermore, moreover. So we'll have a video on that as well. On what are the different kind of connectors that you can use in your body paragraphs, and make comparisons showcasing similar and different ideas using data. So now we are going to make comparisons. The reason we group this information is to be able to make comparisons in our essay. अब cars, books र cameras मा के छ त similarity छ एउटा, right? Similarly computer र perfume मा पनि एउटा खालको similarity छ, which is French are spending more than British, right? And you should be able to compare, okay, more spend त गरिराछ र कति spend गरिराछ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ body paragraph मा देखाउन सक्नु पर्यो है. Now let us look at the body paragraph 1 for this question type. Now, as we have already discussed this question type, I mentioned that in the body paragraph you should mention topic statement, right? So this is an example of a topic statement, meaning overall for cars, books and cameras, British spent more money than French. Now this is this is about what I'm going to elaborate in my essay, and hence I have summarized my entire body paragraph into one statement, which is the topic statement for my body paragraph 1. Now I'm going to elaborate this statement, and I'm going to mention the amount of money that both French and British have spent on the purchase of cars. So for purchase of cars, the money spent by UK was around 450,000, an amount higher by approximately 150,000 when compared to the expenditure of French. Now, do you see the uses of language, right? I'm giving a very direct comparisons. Now, I'm not directly saying what is the amount of money that was spent by French, but I'm giving them an idea because, so basically, French are spending around $300,000 because 450,000 is an amount higher by approximately 150,000 when compared to the expenditure of French, right? So we can actually get the idea that okay, it's my bad, right? So not by 150, but only by 50,000, right? So an amount which is approximately higher by 50,000 when compared to the expense. So we can get the idea that the amount is. Now, do not make such mistakes as well. It's not a very big mistake, but do not make a lot of mathematical errors. However, this will not actually make a lot of difference in your scoring because they are not judging your mathematical skills but your English skills. But again, obviously it's always good to be a little bit accurate with your data. Similarly, again, here is a connector. Similarly, for books and British expenditure, for books, the British expenditure was higher than that of French at approximately 400,000 and 300,000 pounds respectively, right? So again, I'm mentioning data. Moreover, another connector, there is a significant difference of around 200,000 pounds between both countries' expenditure on cameras. Now, this is a highlight that I had mentioned in my overview, and now I'm elaborating on that by presenting data, right? Now, this is how you can go about it. So I've already grouped information, and now I'm providing data to justify whatever main opinions that I had presented in the overview section. Let us move down to body paragraph 2. In this case as well, I have mentioned a topic statement, which is on the other hand, the amount of money paid out on the remaining goods was higher in France. So त्यो goods भनेको computers र perfume हो, right? So above 350,000 pounds were spent by French on computers. Meanwhile, British purchased the same good for exactly 350,000 pounds. So above 350,000 and exactly 350,000, right? Again, I have another typo here. Never mind. Neither of the countries spent much on perfume, accounting only to expenditure of a little below 150,000 in UK and exactly 200. So I have mentioned data for the expenditure of both the countries in both of these goods, right? Now this is all about writing the task 1 essay. अब यही अप्रोच चाहिँ हामीले अरू स्ट्याटिस्टिकल क्वेसनहरूमा पनि अप्लाई गर्नु पर्यो. आई होप द्याट आई वाज क्लियर एन्ड अभियसली वी विल लुक एट दि रुब्रिक्स अफ टास्क 1 र तपाईँको स्कोरिङ कसरी हुन्छ एन्ड हाउ टु युज कनेक्टर्स, हाउ टु बी मोर ग्रामेटिकली साउन्ड, and the structure चाहिँ यही नै हो. And if you're able to do this, you should easily be able to fetch a score of 7 to 7.5 in your writing essay. Alright, so that should be it for today's class, and I'll see you guys in another class where we'll be discussing about a line graph and a pie chart question type. So make sure that you are very clear with the foundation of this question, and then I think we should not have any issues moving ahead. Alright, I'll see you guys in next class. Thank you.